It has been 1 year since Bitcoin became legal tender in El Salvador. Crypto adoption has not been without issues in El Salvador, but it's difficult to weed through the different stories about Bitcoin because there are so many competing interests promoting or refuting Bitcoin. This article will filter through the nonsense and describe how Bitcoin in El Salvador has panned out 1 year after it became legal tender. El Salvador made Bitcoin legal tender ostensibly for a few reasons. The government cited the following reasons. The 3 reasons listed above are all the official reasons that El Salvador gave for making Bitcoin legal tender. There are likely other reasons for El Salvador to make Bitcoin legal tender that they will not say publicly, though. It's also important to note that USD is still legal tender in El Salvador. The country still mostly uses USD despite Bitcoin legal tender. Anyway, the next section will discuss the reality of Bitcoin use in El Salvador since the country made it legal tender. This section will cover point by point the official reasons that El Salvador made Bitcoin legal tender and then describe the reality of the situation. First of all, remittances in El Salvador. Are Salvadorans using Bitcoin for remittances? No, Salvadorans are not really using Bitcoin for remittances. According to information from WorldCoinStats.com, only 3.2% of all remittances are done in Bitcoin, which is pretty bad. Of course, no one expected this number to jump to 100% overnight, but it's an underwhelming use compared to what many in crypto expected. Next, are Salvadorans using Bitcoin for their daily transactions? Again, not really. There's no hard data on this figure, but it's estimated that approximately 80% of shops in the country do not accept Bitcoin despite it being legal tender in the country. With that in mind, it's unlikely that Salvadorans are using Bitcoin for most of their transactions. This came as surprise because the Chivo Wallet app, the official Bitcoin Lightning Network app of El Salvador, had over 4 million downloads when it was released. However, this is because new Chivo wallets received a free $30 deposit. The average salary in El Salvador is $12 per day, so $30 is a few days of work for many Salvadorans. Of course, many would download an app for a free $30 when they make so little per day. Finally, has Bitcoin served as a good hedge against inflation of the United States dollar? Well, El Salvador bought approximately $100 million worth of Bitcoin over the past year at an average price of $45.00. The current price of Bitcoin is about $19.00. USD inflation currently stands around 8.2%, so El Salvador has lost more money by holding Bitcoin than it would have if it held USD over the past year. Of course, Bitcoin is more of a long-term thing for El Salvador, so it's a little silly to declare this a failure after only 1 year. As you can see from the above points, Bitcoin in El Salvador has not been the great success that many people expected. There's not much reason to fear, though. It has only been 1 year since El Salvador made Bitcoin legal tender in the country. The biggest problem with Bitcoin in El Salvador is that El Salvador picked probably the absolute worst time to make Bitcoin legal tender. They basically did it right at the top of the bubble and then proceeded to buy the dip anytime the price dropped. The problem was the price kept dropping,